The City Council Committee on Public Health, Safety, and Environment, co-posted with the Committee of the Whole, met in the City Council chamber on July 22nd, 2025 at 6 p.m. for the purpose of discussing gas leaf blower ordinance. Notice of this meeting was posted on June 30th at 10:02 a.m. Or do I have to start again? Okay, that was just practice. City Council Committee on Public Health, Safety, and Environment, co-posted with the Committee of the Whole, met in the City Council chamber on July 22nd, 2025 at 6 p.m. for the purpose of discussing the gas leaf blower ordinance. Notice of this meeting was posted on June 30th, 2025 at 10:02 a.m. Present from the Public Health, Safety, and Environment Subcommittee, Councilors Stott, Davis, Jerslow, and absent Councilor Harvey. From the Committee of the Whole, we have Councilors Merkel and Morcillo. I'm going to start off by just giving you the flow of the meeting. Oh, I do want to introduce the people who are here from the city. Solicitor Renard is here on Zoom. We have the Health Agent Greenbaum, DPS Director Joden, Building Commissioner Afanos, all in the room. And I'll announce any other department heads who show up. So we're here to discuss the ordinance that was submitted by Councilors Davis and Merkel. And the way I thought we could have this meeting is that the two of them would start out by reading a summary of why they submitted this ordinance. And then if any department heads want to say something, we can do that. But before we do that, after Councilors Davis and Merkel do their summary, I am going to read comments by the city solicitor and our Sustainability and Resiliency Director, Duffy. Then we'll open it up to the council, and then we'll do public testimony. If anyone is from the public wants to testify or do comments, and then we'll bring it back to the council. So we're going to start with Councilor Merkel.
Thank you, Chair Cohen, and I want to thank you for the work you did putting this meeting together. Much appreciated. Yes, residents have been asking me and emailing me and other councilors about this issue for the last couple of years, providing lots of very valid data on the environmental impact and workers' health issues associated with the gas blowers. And so when I started digging into it, I was surprised how detrimental they are, and surprised by the list of cities and towns in the area that have gas leaf blower restrictions in place. And so we've spoken with landscapers, I've spoken to city councilors in other cities and our department heads about this. And the consensus is from many environmental groups and consumer reports that curbing the use of gas leaf blowers has an absolutely huge benefit for the environment and on public health. Gas leaf blowers are notorious for their loud noise levels, negatively impacting quality of life, and the electric leaf blowers are much quieter, and the workers who operate gas leaf blowers are exposed to high levels of air pollution as well as vibration hazards, and transitioning to quieter, cleaner electric alternatives can improve working conditions and protect the health and safety of outdoor workers. Most of these bans exempt their DPS and police and fire departments, and the reason for this, after doing a lot of research, was because the technology for the batteries is just not there yet for their large-scale projects. When Councilor Davis and I met with Ray Jordan from DPS and the police chief and the fire chief, and also Neil Duffy, the director of sustainability, real important points were brought up, such as the scale of the city tasks that they perform with storms, flooding, large tourism crowds, construction debris. It was a great opportunity to meet with this crew. I learned an incredible amount about city operations, and I remember Chief Miller, making interesting points regarding the need for police details that he has to provide for the cleanups, so the importance of efficiency, and Chief Dion, discussing with me on the phone the important role that the power of the blowers plays in his work, including brush fires and cleanup with construction debris. So I found that really interesting. And also Ray spoke to how he's, constantly reviewing the industry for greener equipment, such as electric front-end trash loaders. It was a great conversation. And of course, I'll let him speak for himself, but I wanted to make the points that resonated with me, in these conversations. And the goal is really, I'm hoping to move the needle for greener options, when we can without jeopardizing public safety. That's the balance. And so I'm hoping maybe we can land with, replacing, with the city replacing any gas blowers with electric blowers when needed, and, having some sort of, informal commitment to move away from gas blowers as the technology allows. And I ride an electric scooter, so I do know a little bit also about the research with the batteries, and safety that's involved with heat, and if you have to store a lot of them in outdoor spaces. So anyway, also, most of the bans in the cities and the towns with restrictions in place only covered May to around September or October, so they could use the gas blowers for larger spring and fall cleanups. This was to help ease the burden in the transitions that many cities and towns are making to banning the gas blowers. And our proposal follows suit with both of these approaches. And we've also included compliance times that are 1 to 2 years away to ease the financial burdens involved in making the changes. And I've also spoken with councilors in other cities that have put restrictions in place, and I've spoken with landscapers, and I'd like to offer a little feedback with that too that I found interesting. I spoke with a woman who has a landscaping business here in the area with a crew of 4 to 5 people on the North Shore. And she has clients in Salem and the surrounding areas. And she has clients in Cambridge, Newton, and Chestnut Hill that banned the blowers over the summer months. And, of course, she did say, it was hard on her business. She said, I have 7 blowers. They cost $500 to $700 each. And when the gas blower bans came into effect, she had to buy new equipment and batteries and multi-unit chargers. And she mentioned, the batteries are limited in the how long they last when used. I did ask her if her clients were open to learning about how stripping the ground, with blowers is not good for the ecosystem and environment, and maybe adjusting expectations, because I really have found this whole issue really interesting. And she said no. She passed along the increases, in cost to her clients, and they just paid it because they want no change in their service. And she pointed out the irony that some of her clients are the ones who pushed for the restrictions, but they still didn't want any flexibility in their cleanup. So I just thought these were interesting points to be made. She did say that it's been very helpful that the restrictions have not been in place for spring and fall cleanups. She said that would have really put it next level. And also the grace period for compliance was helpful to absorb the costs as well. And she mentioned how hard it is for big storms. If there's a big storm, that she can't just use all equipment, that she has. And that's why we have included a temporary exemption application option that you can ask the city for if we had some kind of, huge storm and it puts everyone in a spot. So I see this as a good first step we can take in addressing, gas leaf blowers and just in starting to move towards using greener equipment. And I just want to thank Councilor Davis. He worked on this the whole journey with me. Zach Calderon for his help. He's a resident as well. And the department heads and the city solicitor that helped me put all of this together over the last couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Merkel. Councilor Davis?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councilor Merkel, for the great summary, and thanks for being a wonderful partner on this journey. Lots of meetings, lots of research. I wanted to add a couple things. First of all, kind of like a public service announcement. The absolute best thing is leaving the leaves on the lawn, right? We're talking up electric leaf blowers, but just leaving a light layer of leaves on your lawn or raking them into garden beds helps nourish the soil, insulate plant roots, creates habitat for pollinators, insects, small animals. Really important for soil regeneration and local biodiversity. Councilor Merkel mentioned our surprise at just how detrimental gas leaf blowers were. There was a statistic that really has been kind of sticking out to me through this whole process, which is a single hour of operation of a gas-powered leaf blower can produce the same amount of smog-forming emissions as driving a car for 1,100 miles. That's according to the California Air Resources Board. That's due to having inefficient two-stroke engines that spew out carbon dioxide, nitrogen oxides, and hydrocarbons. Councilor Merkel mentioned a lot of valuable information from resident Zach Calderon. Some of that stood out to me was data from the American Lung Association, which explicitly recommends electric leaf blowers over gas-powered ones due to their reduced impact on air quality and respiratory health, and are concerned about landscapers and maintenance workers being exposed regularly to gas leaf blowers. That same research shows that they can face elevated risk for cardiovascular disease, stroke, respiratory illnesses, cancer, and even prenatal health impacts. Comparing gas and electric leaf blowers in terms of noise comparison, gas ones operate at 80 to 90 decibels, which is far above safe hearing thresholds, equivalent to standing next to a motorcycle or a jackhammer, while electric models range from 65 to 70 decibels. And then in terms of cost, gas leaf blowers range from $125 to $400. Corded electric leaf blowers range from $30 to $100. So much cheaper, but then replacing the batteries a bit pricier with batteries ranging from $110 all the way up to $660. But those batteries can last up to 3 to 5 years, and there's no need to buy or store gasoline. So kind of a complicated, cost comparison, but I think what we've seen in the long term is that electric leaf blowers are a bit cheaper. And that's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Davis. Wanted to mention that Police Chief Miller is in the house. So next I'm going to read from two of the department heads who are not here in person. The first one is from Sustainability and Resiliency Director Neil Duffy. I'll skip over the platitudes. I applaud the council for considering this matter and support the passing of this ordinance as written. Banning gas-powered leaf blowers between Memorial Day and Labor Day will not have a significant impact on the city's overall greenhouse gas emissions, but it will provide improvements to local air quality and reduce noise pollution. The ordinance provides reasonable implementation timelines for both residential and commercial operators, and our department is standing by to create informational and educational materials to aid in this transition. Regarding city operations, my understanding is that the Department of Public Services is committed to and actively exploring the feasibility of a transition to electric-powered leaf blowers and other equipment over time. The Sustainability and Resiliency Department will work with them to ensure they have the resources and assistance necessary to do so strategically without sacrificing the level of services residents and visitors of Salem require. Now I'm going to read a recommended edit from Solicitor Renard, who is on Zoom. And I'm going to read this, but then when we get into deliberations by the council, we can actually consider whether these should be incorporated. One is to add to C1 heading and hours of operation, add a second paragraph as follows. These two come from the Brookline ordinance. No commercial leaf blower operator, property owner, or property manager shall authorize or permit the operation of gas-powered leaf blowers on property under their control or on the sidewalks or ways contiguous to such property, nor shall any person operate a gas-powered leaf blower except between the hours of 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And then edit C2 by replacing the paragraph with municipal departments and their contractors shall be exempt from this ordinance for routine maintenance. However, the department shall make every effort to reduce noise in residential areas, particularly during the limited use hours set forth herein. Further, when the departments were purchasing new leaf blower equipment, departments must consider equipment with the lowest decibel rating for the performance standard required. Now, before the council asks questions or makes comments, are there any department heads who want to make comments now, or do you want to wait and answer questions? Okay. If it's okay with the council, I'm going to start with a couple of questions that I have myself, okay? Just a couple. I do want to state from the beginning that people who know my previous history and what I've done at the council know that I'd like everything converted from fossil fuels. So this, you know, in spirit, this initiative I think is really good. Obviously, it's a challenge to get to where we want to be as fast as we need to be. So my first question, I think, is actually going to be directed to Councilors Merkel and Davis. Ooh, didn't expect that. I reviewed the 10 communities that have ordinances. I did talk briefly to Councilor Merkel about this. Of the 10, 2 are cities that somewhat reflect the demographics of Salem, Newton, and Cambridge. And the other 8 communities are all towns that I perceive as being pretty affluent, really different than Salem. Arlington, Belmont, Brookline, Concord, Lexington, Lincoln, Marblehead, and Swampscott. And this doesn't mean that I feel like we shouldn't go forward with the ordinance, but these are communities that tend to have different layouts of land, density, things like that. And so my question is about equity. I'm really concerned about, you know, when this is implemented, the compliance dates, because I am concerned that the workers, the employees of the companies that do the landscaping, for example, tend to be from you know, immigrant communities, lower income, and I'm concerned about how it will impact whether they potentially would have to lay off people, you know, to your point, Councilor Merkel, about, you know, the person, are they going to be able to have the same amount of work? So I don't know if either one of you want to address that.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. I definitely wrestled with that myself. Absolutely. And that's where we came to, first, what convinced me that I did want to move forward with this is my conversations with people in the industry. And one person, when I was Googling articles about other cities and towns that have put this in place. One person that caught my attention was a former city councilor in Cambridge. He was a 3-term councilor, Quentin Zondervan, and his family was generationally in the landscaping business, and he had been a landscaper, and he was adamant that nobody should have, you know, be using a gas blower, that he saw how detrimental the health was on himself and his family, and he really pushed for it in Cambridge. And I mean, it is a balance because, yes, it's when you put a financial burden on an industry, you have to think of the effect on the workers. But I also, so I reached out to this gentleman, and I set up a Zoom with him, just me and him, so I could take a deeper dive into those concerns. And for him, the need to improve the workers' health was a priority for him to move forward with this in Cambridge. Also, that is one reason, too, and also with our discussions with the police chief. If I remember anything wrong, please correct me, but that's why we landed on the property owner or the person in control of or managing the property shall be responsible for ensuring compliance. That was how we landed on who would be responsible for compliance. We didn't want to put it on, a small business that may not know all the regulations in their community. And also, like I had said in my opening statement, try to ease the burden of, longer compliance times and not having it during the spring and fall cleanups until, further equipment slowly gets introduced to the equipment that they have, trying to strike a balance with that. I hope that answers your questions, but I respect those concerns.
Councilor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, not too much to add, but I had that same concern as well, and I think that's a big reason why we wanted to separate the residential compliance time with the compliance time for commercial leaf blower operators, right? So we're talking about May 31st, 2027. And in my imagination, we're talking more so about these, landscaping companies when their gas leaf blowers are kind of on their last leg, using that as an opportunity to get the electric leaf blowers rather than, okay, we're doing this tomorrow, you've got to buy, all new equipment, right? And then just what Councilor Merkel brought up of all the incredible health detriments, right? So I think in the balance of looking out for the workers, that sticks out to me, I think more so.
Thank you both. Two things about that before I ask my next question. And one is, I was trying to think of how we can monitor and enforce property owners being responsible. It just seems like, who's going to do that? Who's going to monitor? Just throwing that out. And it's a little unfair, as you and I talked about, to use Quentin Zondervan as an example because he's one of my mentors, actually. My next question, I think I'll start with Director Joden, and if any other department head wants to chime in, and that is this. So I do believe, and I've talked about this when I talk about EV charging and things like that, that electric vehicles, electric appliances are higher performance, lower maintenance. But in my conversations with Councilor Merkel and some of the department heads that I've had on my own, there seems to be a real need to do like more intense leaf blowing, whether it's for a brush fire or to clear, city, pedestrian mall or whatever after Halloween. And so I'm not concerned about the performance of the actual blower itself, but the battery life and the potential danger of having, maybe a lot of batteries connected to each other in the same location. I hope that question makes sense. So yeah, do you want to start with you, Director, and then if any other department heads want to chime in?
So Ray Joden, Salem DPS. Thank you, Councilor. So one of the major concerns, like you mentioned, was the capacity of carrying enough blowers to complete our tasks, and especially the larger jobs. Heat is always a concern. Heat index is always a huge concern on the jobs, and carrying around a lot of batteries being available would not be feasible at this time. to complete some of the larger jobs, especially in the mall, haunted happenings. I remember we did a co-pilot joint effort with the fire department during the wildlife fires to actually create windrows to minimize the impacts to some of the neighborhoods there. So some of those would not be capable with the current conditions of the batteries storing and having them available to complete those tasks. So that would be a really, at current technology, that would be a real difficult capacity.
Can you speak to how long, you know, I know that the batteries, there are different size batteries, and there's like 2-cycle, 4-cycle blowers, but is there a anticipated amount of time that you know, like the average battery life when you're out in the field doing the work?
So currently at the top tier batteries that we're exhibiting right now, the 5Hs, the 8Hs, we're running into about 20 minutes of runtime per battery currently.
Okay. Any other department heads? Councilor Varela is actually on Zoom, and Councilor, you have a question, so let me see if I can. Oh. It doesn't. Thank you, Councilor Marcillo. Councilor Varela, Councilor Varela, I'm going to allow you to speak. You can unmute yourself.
Excellent. You guys hear me? All right. Sorry, can you guys hear me? Might have to unmute the TV mic.
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Cohen, not being a member of the committee. Just wanted to weigh on this a little bit. You know, obviously when it comes to leaf blowers, I see the intent with this ordinance. You know, and on an environmental standpoint, I see the benefit. My only concern is with the equity piece. With landscapers here in Salem, I feel like this could be problematic. With the battery life of the electric leaf blowers, I guess I'm really concerned about the smaller landscapers here in Salem being able to actually implement this and do it successfully. As Department Head Ray Joden said, you know, when it comes to even the 8H batteries, you have a limited runtime to do a job. And you know, at that point, you know, how many batteries do you have offhand? Where can you charge them? Do you have enough capacity? And I just, you know, seeing the overall cost of leaf blowers that are electric, they tend to be a lot more expensive, and especially with the batteries. I'm trying to figure out a way through either attrition with our locals here when it comes to having them eventually comply with electric leaf blowers could be a possibility, but I just don't think the technology is there for us for something to be reasonable of like this change as of now. I understand you guys are talking about implementing this in the next couple of years. Maybe we can review it then, but that's my overarching concern is we're, you know, a small business is going to have, if they have to actually be a part of this and they have to get rid of their gas leaf blowers, they may have to get rid of employees just to make up for the cost of this additional equipment. So again, that is my concern, and I think we should take a deeper dive in this. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Varela. Now I'm going to open it up to the council for, you know, to interact or to ask questions of the department heads. And we'll start, and I'm sorry, I saw Councilor Stott first, then we'll go to Councilor Marcello.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. I just had a few questions based off of the comments that I heard this evening, and I'll also preface my questions and comments with a similar statement that I understand and support the intent and the reasoning behind this. Obviously, we want health and safety for everyone. I just have a few concerns about the implementation of it. The two concerns for me are related to noise, and I will ask my fellow councilor Davis, who I believe you mentioned some stats around the decibel levels. All I wrote down were electric were 65 to 70. I was curious what the gas were, because it didn't seem that drastically different to me. I was just curious of that because I did see in one of the other city ordinances there was an actual decibel rating. So if we're seriously concerned about the noise level, which as someone who has extreme hearing loss, I also am concerned about that, especially for workers and even residents that are nearby. We should be looking at it actually solving the problem of either making sure, you know, workers have equipment to cover their ears, or there's a specific rating for decibel levels for the equipment that they are using. Were you able to find that already?
Councilor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, I had gas leaf blowers at 80 to 90 decibels and electric at 65 to 70.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, so that's interesting. I mean, there is obviously a difference, but it's still pretty high for electric ones. The other comment I wanted to make was based off of Councilor Merkel's comments about reaching out to a landscape company that works in towns that have this implemented, which I think is a great start to this conversation. And just that quote that it was hard on my business really hit home. Like, this is not a time that I would want to proactively be doing anything that would be hard on a small business. I just want to note that because that really gives me pause. I mean, I understand the intent, and business outweighs health, or health should outweigh business bottom lines. It's a delicate balance, but again, it's really hard to kind of swallow that pill if it's not something that's absolutely required, or if it's not something that I think is really solving the problem of reducing noise and improving air quality. So I'll get into my questions now about specifically the 20-minute run time. I thought that was very interesting for electric. And we are essentially discussing the possibility of giving an exemption to the city because of the reduced runtime and perhaps larger jobs that the city needs these machinery to do. Commercials, landscapers, I think, also have those similar problems. I'm thinking, I mean, I get complaints about gas blowers, and honestly, the complaints that I get are from the larger developments, from like the SoFi apartments or the larger ones that have very large jobs similar to what I would think would be cleaning up a park or cleaning up a school ground. So I don't quite understand why we would give an exemption to ourselves, but not towards the businesses that are doing literally the same exact job, because how would they be able to do a large job like that with a 20-minute runtime on their machinery? So I was wondering, I would feel more comfortable with exemptions if there was something specifically related to what was mentioned, like Halloween haunted happenings cleanup on Halloween night. We're all familiar with the blowers going down the Ped Mall. Like, that's a specific exemption like the fires in the woods. But if it's just because 20-minute runtime and the machine machinery is not there yet, I don't think that's a fair exemption for us to give ourselves and to not give the commercial businesses.
Before you go further,
Yep.
Chief Miller would like to answer that question
Oh, great.
or address it.
Thank you, Chairman, Counselor. I want to speak specifically to your question about events, but also it's not limited to haunted happenings. It's really any of the many public events that we have that require a DPS cleanup once the crowd is dispersed. There's the anecdotal reason that it provides a very nice punctuation at the end of the evening, right? The DPS going to work cleaning up after a big public event is a nice way to remind those kind of stragglers that, hey, the event is over. But more pointedly, almost all of these events involve a lot of overtime, DPS overtime, police overtime, fire overtime in certain cases. The longer that the cleanup takes, the more it costs. And because of overtime rules, it tends to be the most costly at the end of the evening, more costly at the end of the evening than over the course of the evening. So for that reason, I support an exemption for DPS.
So can I just, oh, the question just left my head. So it's done more often than I guess I know about, but I do also hear compliments about the cleanliness of the streets. You know, the day after events, it's usually like the cleanest downtown ever is because we have that process to go through and clean up. Do you know, and it might be a Ray question, do the workers wear ear protection while they utilize that machinery?
I think, I'll certainly let Ray handle that question, but to your point about it being the cleanest people frequently see, that's not an accident. Usually when we have all those streets blocked off, it's an excellent opportunity to go through and do a real good cleaning. So it's, that's on purpose, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So yeah, good. Do they wear protection, and are you stating that like an electric machine would just not have the same impacts?
So to answer your first question, yes, the employees are wearing PPE. They are issued PPE for those intended reasons: hearing protection, ventilation protection. Second would be it's by design because we're loud and annoying for a reason. You know, we're loud and annoying to move the crowds, to disperse them, to get them, you know, publicly safety. You know, you don't have to stay here, but you have to go home. You know, I recognize that exempting DPS in an ordinance may raise concerns because it's important to acknowledge perception matters, right? And that fairness and transparency must guide our decisions. However, exemptions are not about avoiding responsibility. It's about ensuring the city can continue to deliver essential services without interruption. DPS is tasked with maintaining public safety and responding to any and all sorts of emergencies, and supporting other city operations on a scale that differs significantly from residential use. Until electronic technology can really reliably meet these demands, an exemption really needs to be considered for DPS. Practical, effective stewardships of resources is what we should be following. That being said, DPS remains committed to sustainability. We'll always continue to evaluate emerging technologies to pilot electronic alternatives when feasible and transition responsibly when equipment improves. Our goal is to lead by example and not through symbolic compliance, but through practical, effective stewardships of the city.
Sorry, just to continue on that. I actually fully support the use of the public safety aspect because you're right, they are loud, annoying. We're sending a very clear message. Could you give me an example of where the DPW wouldn't be able to utilize an electric blower, utilizing it for its intended purpose as a machine of landscaping and blowing leaves?
So it would be storm response primarily, larger scale leaf cleanups in the parks.
So park cleanup.
Park cleanup mainly.
the park cleanup that goes now, I mean, I know there's other large or loud machinery that's used, like the weed whackers. I know there are other things that make the lawn mower machines, all of that. So as a whole, those would all still continue. But I'm having a struggle with distinguishing how park cleanup, so utilizing a gas blower primarily for its purpose of blowing leaves in a park, is different than a commercial landscaper cleaning up a large development property like SoFi, for example. Is it the scale? Are you just saying the parks are much bigger, or?
I'm saying the scale, the staffing. I can't advocate for landscapers. I can only advocate for the DPS operations. So I could tell you that we blow the Point neighborhood sidewalks with trash multiple times a year, and street sweep multiple times a year for public, health reasons. I could tell you that cleanups in parks take longer, which is why we use backpack blowers. I can only advocate for DPS in the city municipal contractors. I cannot advocate for personal landscapers.
So that will just lead me to my last comment, because I know others want to make comment here. Communication. How would we get this message out, and how would I haven't heard from one landscaper coming up or business coming up to provide their input, other than Councilor Merkel doing that research, which I truly appreciate. But I do think we kind of falter and fail a lot in getting the word out. Looking back at the styrofoam ban that we did, people didn't realize it was out, even though we had a year and a half implementation, until they were getting warning messages from the health department. And that's frustrating. So as long as it doesn't really matter how long we have for the implementation time, if it's 2027 or 2028, if we don't have a solid plan in place and a solid commitment to communicate out and reach out to those registered commercial landscape companies, they're not going to know about it until they get a warning message, and that's not fair.
Councilor Marcillo.
Thank you, Chair. I want to start by saying personally, I am in favor of this because I personally don't like leaf blowers. They're noisy. The air quality is awful. I have to close my front windows whenever the neighbor across the street has their lawn done. It's really annoying. I have to say that I get a ton of emails and calls about this, and when I had it in the newsletter, I think I got the highest number of emails after it saying I'm in favor of this. What I'm not in favor of is the rollout of it. And for residents in Salem, it starts on 1 year. For contractors, it starts a year later. For the city, who knows? We need to lead by example. And so as it stands, I don't think I could vote for this if the city's not a part of it. The city, all the parks in the city, and I get that the parks are large, but there's pretty large properties in Marblehead, and somehow all those contractors get the job done in that period between Memorial Day and Labor Day with electric leaf blowers, whatever they're doing. And I think we can also distinguish between landscaping use and public street cleaning or whatever after events. And if the fire department uses it in the woods for a fire, of course that's necessary. Of course that would be an exemption. I'd have a hard time with an exemption from the city and the city's contractors, by the way, for cleaning up the parks. That I have a problem with if we're going to make residents do this, because as Councilor Stott said, some of these developments are pretty huge, right? The whole Whalers Lane, that whole condo complex, right? Those residents would love it if we banned the leaf blowers, but they also have contractors that go through and do that, huge swaths of property at the same time. So, that's where I'm standing right now. I just can't see the exemptions. I can't see the rollout differences. And I also had a question, just so I can clarify this. The suggested edit from Beth Renard, the hours of operation, did you say 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.? I don't even know how that goes along with the noise ordinance in the city, right? 8 p.m., who would want that in their neighborhood at 8 p.m., a leaf blower, of any sort? So I would have to push back on that a little bit too. But How many leaf blowers does DPS own?
That's a hard question. That's a hard question to answer right now. I'd have to get back
Is
to
it
you on that.
10? Is it 30? Is it 100?
It's not 30, but it's, more than 10.
More than 10? Okay.
More than 10, but no more than 30.
And how many of the parks does DPS take care of personally as opposed to contractors?
We take care of, I apologize, I'm trying to think. It's roughly about 36 parks, and the contractor takes care of 2.
2? Which parks do the contractors do?
Contractor takes care of Forest River and the Willows.
Forest River and the Willows.
Yeah,
Okay.
City crews take care of the rest.
Okay. And all of the city property?
Correct. There's about 48 city properties that we maintain on the regular, not counting city streets.
So 48 city properties, and how many parks do you do?
About 36. I'll get the final numbers from the budget book to be
I
on.
mean, that's fine. That gives
Yeah.
us an idea of how many pieces of property.
Yeah.
And do you know how many the fire department uses or has?
I don't have that information, no.
Do they use your equipment?
They
for
use our
fires?
equipment, yeah.
And do they use them for like car crashes also to get debris out of the road, or do
No,
they
that's
use them?
us.
That's you guys?
That's us.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Merkel, do you mind if I make a comment before I turn over to you? And then I'll go to Councilor Merkel and Councilor Jerslow. So when I introduced the meeting, I said that I'm in support of this in spirit. When I looked at the 10 communities, and you, Councilor Davis and Merkel, you might have the actual information, but most of the communities that have ordinances ban gas leaf blowers for a period of time. I think there's only 2 of the communities that actually ban gas leaf blowers altogether. I may be wrong, but I thought it was 2 ban them altogether and 8 do something similar to what we're talking about, which is to ban them during certain months or seasons or whatever. And the reason I bring this up is relative to something that Councilor Merkel said that like resonated with me. Like, I believe in the concept for health and wellness and, sustainability and everything else, that we should be moving to electric leaf blowers. And part of my thinking, as Councilor Morcillo was talking, is it better if we're going to have compliance dates that are sometime in the future, come up with a time where everyone can be electric leaf blowers? Instead of like, okay, we're going to ban gas leaf blowers in the summer, and residents can do it in 2026, and commercial can do it in 2027, and the DPS can do it in 2050, or whatever. I just don't know why the hunt isn't to get to all electric leaf blowers when it makes sense. If we had an attrition program, so that when DPS leaf blower craps out, then they buy an electric leaf blower, and that wouldn't necessarily be one that would be used for one of the more intense jobs, in the beginning. So I'm just thinking, like, is the hunt to get to a better place or get to the best place? In my mind, the best place is to come up with a time, whenever it is. I'm not, smart enough to make this decision tonight, of when we could move like Brookline did and say, no gas leaf blowers. And one of the things that Councilor Merkel said to me is, technology is changing all the time. We don't know if someone's going to have a battery before the compliance date for commercial that is going to make it so that an electric leaf blower is the best option. Councilor Merkel, Councilor Jerslow, Councilor Davis.
Thank you, Chair Cohen, not being a member of the committee, and thank you everyone for the great points that were that are really important to consider. And so, as I kept looking in this over time, what I found was and including the landscaper that I referenced, is that I didn't, and I'm not saying there aren't any, but I didn't find any that only operate in Salem. Like the one I referenced is small, with 4 to 5 people, yet has clients in Cambridge, Newton, and Chestnut Hill. The list includes, Swampscott, Marblehead, these communities that are not far from us. And so the landscaping companies, it's already here for them. They've already had to, start complying or thinking about complying as more and more cities and towns are adopting these restrictions. So it's moving in that direction already. We wouldn't be initiating a hardship that most don't already have to be dealing with.
But as I was saying, 8 out of the 10 are only making it so they can't operate the gas leaf blowers during certain times of the year.
Yes, so that's interesting too. And it's because of all these reasons that so many landed in different places. You have Belmont, seasonal ban, May 15th to December 30th. Brookline does it by decimals. It's really... everybody kind of landed in different places. One of them has that Concord, you can use them between March 15th and May 30th, and again September 15th to December 30th. So it was all over the place. And the compliance times were for the very reasons you mentioned, Councilor Cohen, were all over the place as well, because everyone realized, for, public health, for emergency cleanups, that this isn't practical. Some had, at least one had 5 years compliance for their DPS. And for the reason you spoke to, that is just too arbitrary. I personally didn't want to try to do something like that because, as you said, what if the technology is there in 3 years? It's very fluid. I see this as a starting place. It's something we can revisit because of all the twists and turns in the technology. And, so we keep the conversations going. But it is the reason these landed. And also, some did go by the decimals, but that gets murky for enforcement. It's a lot clearer if something is a gas blower or an electric blower. And also another, I had a conversation with, someone who works in the environmental space, and also taking a deep dive in the consumer reports. I really thought that was just great information in that the data's all over the place because, as it said, you'll have one, really, the decimal levels for the gas leaf blowers varied, wildly, and you can skew the data. And to even say the price or the, where the sound lands for each one varied, but the consensus was very clear that it is enormously beneficial to have the electric. And I'd be happy to send out that information as well that I researched. There were a lot of articles, but I really liked the way that expressed it. So I focused on, they had their evaluations, for noise, for public health, for environment, and you had read that as well, Councilor Davis. But the consensus was very clear. That they were considerably quieter and considerably better for the environment, if that answers, some of the questions.
Before we go to Councilor Gerslow, Solicitor Renard raised her hand. Would you be okay, Councilor Gerslow, if we let her go first? Okay. City Solicitor?
Hear me? Hold on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
You can hear me. Give me thumbs up, please. Great, thank you. Thanks for letting me speak. I do have an OT coming here to my house in about 10 minutes. So I just wanted to share with you that The edits that I proposed were based on my conversation with the DPS director. The 8 p.m. Is outside of the construction limitations of 5 o'clock inside of our noise ordinance, and it was something that he recommended because contractors generally do in the fall, particularly spend time into the evening to do the leaf blowing on the big pickups. If there's anything else that I can answer relative to my recommendations or anything else, just wanted to let you know that I unfortunately have a hard stop in about 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if any of my colleagues have ever used a leaf blower or not, but I have electric leaf blower, and Director Joden is right. The 4-H usually only lasts about 20 minutes. It takes me for my postage-size lot to do my hedges and weed whacking and blowing. It takes at least 4 to 5 batteries, and it's very frustrating. I have a lawnmower that's electric, the weed whacker is electric, my hedges are electric, everything's electric, but I don't think that the technology is there yet to do it bigger scale. The batteries are very expensive. We've had to replace our batteries for our lawnmower, and they are very expensive, and I don't even know where we recycle these batteries. Does anybody can tell us where we recycle these batteries?
At the drop-off at the high school.
At the high school, they
Yeah.
can take those?
Yes.
Okay. But they are very expensive to get rid of. They are very expensive to buy. We used to have a gas blower, and, you know, $3 or less than $3 for a gallon of gas could last you for a month. I just think this would be detrimental to a landscaping company. I wish the technology was there, that we could all go to it, but I just don't think it's there, and I would not be in favor of this. Thank you.
Councilor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few thoughts that I had. Appreciation to Councilor Stott for bringing up just kind of getting this out there. Want to say I'd absolutely support, amendment that, said something along the lines of the city notifying, all the landscaper companies, whether that's through the solicitor or the Eileen or, however, that whatever makes the most sense. And I understand the uncomfortability about people and companies doing something that the city isn't. And I'm wondering if there's a changing of language, just kind of, rattling amendments in my head of rather than the separation being the city versus residents versus contractors, there could be some type of language about public events or language about the size of the area that's being blown instead, so that there's not that kind of separation, but it's something that's actually logical and based off of why those exemptions would need to exist, that would still allow our departments to do their jobs and perhaps allow some of those contractors that are working on much larger areas the flexibility to do that as well. And I had a third thought as well. In terms of language phasing out, having folks phase out their blowers rather than having dates. Councilor Merkel and I had a lot of meetings that focus a lot of those meetings, the time was devoted to enforcement. And I think enforcement with this is already tricky. There was a lot of back and forth. We'd kind of be relying on residents to hear the very loud blowers, call, the police come, give the fine. If the language instead was, we want people to phase out their gas leaf blowers, when they die off and replace them with electric leaf blowers, I think that what we came to is that would be impossible to enforce, right? Finding out what, the date that someone bought that or whether they had that was replacing a gas leaf blower, I think that would be kind of impossible, although I understand the kind of intent behind that. I think that was the kind of verdict that we came to on that.
Councilor Marcelo.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Joden, do you know what the lifespan is of one of your gas-powered blowers?
Very long. We maintain them. We've had gas back blowers. I think the oldest one I have in my fleet right now is probably going on 10, 11 years.
And do you think it's going to last more than another 5?
Hopefully, yes. Most of my equipment runs anywhere between 14 and 16 years if they're well maintained.
Before we do motions or have more deliberations, I'd like to open it up for public testimony, if that's okay with the council. I do want to go back to something I said. If we pass the ordinance as is, or like 8 out of the 10 communities have passed it, everyone's still using gas leaf blower. They're just using it at different times. I mean, the most, I mean, I'm see this from a health environmental standpoint, but most of the complaints I get are from noise. You know, when they're doing Palmer Cove Park or something, it's like, I can't believe how noisy it is. Can you make them stop? Okay? So I just thinking that we've already built in this compliance dates where it's like staggered for different groups. I just don't know why we can't try to figure out when we can reasonably, you know, to make sure that, you know, they're efficient enough that we can get to a place where we're not using gas. Just a thought. But I'm going to open it up for public testimony. And as I said to, I think, most of you, when you do come to the podium, if you want to say your name and address, fine. But please speak into the microphone so people in Zoom land can hear you. And we'll just go around the room if that's okay, because I know these folk were here first. So if you guys have testimony, we'll just go in this direction. And please address your comments to me as the chair, okay?
Thank you. Danielle Hanrahan, 28 Beckford Street. Firstly, I want to say the perfect is the enemy of the good. So if you want to have like the perfect piece of equipment before you do anything to mitigate the hazardous effects of this equipment, I would try to dissuade you from that. Regarding the issue of the landscapers needing to let people go because they have to use electric equipment or, God forbid, rakes, which is also an option that's never talked about. It's what we used before we had these horrible gas-powered leaf blowers, and they work. And there was this whole thing that was called the granny rake, and this grandmother raked faster than these guys with leaf blowers could deal with the leaves. So I don't think that rakes are out of the question, and I don't think that people are really going to lay off workers if there's a ban on the gas-powered leaf blowers, and maybe they have to take out a rake more often than they might want to. And I think that's I also, I agree with what Councilor Marcello said about the phasing in and it being not a good look for the city to be able to continue using the gas-powered leaf blowers, except in the case of an emergency or fire hazard mitigation or something like that, or perhaps after October 31st, and I can understand that, but I do agree that that's just not a good look to anyone who sees that happening, especially the people who own the landscaping companies. And I would make the time frame longer. I'm a birder, and migration happens in May and September, so I would like include those 2 months, and I would make it 5 months instead of 3 months. There's a lot of birds coming through. They rest in the day, they migrate at night, and then you have all of this noise and people blowing bushes where they are, and it's just detrimental environmentally for birds and people. Other cities have been able to comply with the ban, including their DPW, and that being Concord and Swampscott right next door. And in terms of the economies that you're worried about, I think that economy should never trump health of workers or the people in the nearby area. So I actually don't think the economics are going to prove to be a real issue anyhow. I think that people will pass on the cost of their new equipment or more time because they're raking to the people hiring them, and I think generally those people can afford to have the cost passed on. I think that's how the economies will work. And I do think that the noise is a health issue, so it's not just the air. You had mentioned that people complain about the noise. The noise is a health issue. It's a health issue for the workers, for sure, and they might have their protection on, but then when the person coming by with their baby in the stroller or kids walking on the street are affected by this noise, by the dust that blows up feces and bacteria and all kinds of other things. So it's not just dust, it's molds, it's a lot of detrimental particulate that gets blown up into the air. Thank you very much. And thank you for your work on this, counselors. I appreciate it.
Anyone from, yep?
Good evening, Helen Sides, 35 Broad Street. I'm speaking about it. I am in favor of banning the gas blowers. It is a scourge. The noise, the pollution, when those things, there's a street in our neighborhood that on Thursday, those things come out and they do the whole street, and you can't walk down the street. And in the meantime, there's painters scraping, there's lead paint on the ground, the blowers are blowing that all over the place, along with the dirt and the mold and the dried up oil and everything else, and they stand on opposite sides of the road and they blow back and forth. I mean, it's the most absurd thing to witness. The pollution that these things generate, the noise, it's unbelievable to me that we allow these things. I too come from an environmental position on this. I think that it's a terrible thing, as Danielle said, that we're talking about economics when we're talking about health of our animals, health of the creatures that live in the soil, health of the animals that break down the dirt. You know, this is a whole ecosystem for a world that we're just destroying, and it makes me so sad. We have such an obsession now with our outdoors being as clean as our indoors. It's insane what people expect now for their yards and the public streets to be spotless. It's ridiculous. A rake can do this job. We can, you know, it's really unbelievable to me. A few years ago, now it's going to be longer ago, I worked with Sean Clark at the time from Waters and Brown and another painting contractor, Preserve Services, to try to get the Board of Health to institute HEPA sanding with electric sanders, HEPA vac. Nothing could be better for sanding the houses, for collecting the dust. It's going on the ground with hand scraping, hand sanding. It's absurd. It's not being all caught up in the drop cloths. I mean, I see this as a connected issue. We need to think about what we're doing to the pedestrians, to the babies in the carriages, as we said, to us in the neighborhood. It's terrible, and I would like the Board of Health to revisit the HEPA cleaning, because I think this is a very related issue, and those things are available. I think that the painting companies would love to be able to sand and not be expected to clean up particulate with drop cloths. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public?
Hi, I'm Ginny Gannett, and I live, oh, it's close, sorry. Okay. I wasn't going to talk and say anything, but I live on that street, and it is a nightmare. We have a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old, and we have to close all the windows, and we have a back deck, and we close that off. It's the smell, it's the sound, it's the kind of destruction to the whole ecosystem. I mean, I agree with everything people have been saying on what the detrimental effects are. And kind of as an aside, I was a pediatric nurse in pulmonary, and none of this is going to be good for anybody. So all of the days that we're having when we're seeing that the air quality is bad and people who are vulnerable should stay inside should really be a cautionary tale. So I would just encourage people to find a way through the parts that make it difficult to go forward. And I agree that, aiming to try to not have them at all is the direction that we should be headed. So I would just say that. Thanks.
Anyone else?
Good evening, thank you. My name is Lisa Ewing. I live on the Whalers Lane area, and I wasn't going to speak, but I'm here, so why not put my 2 cents in. I agree with this. I agree with moving toward an absolute ban, because I do think, ecologically speaking, that they're detrimental, and rakes and brooms work, and I understand the city has to contend with overtime and cost issues, and that may be something to think about. But for the general neighborhoods, I really would like to see these banned from use, so thank you.
Okay. Going to throw it back to the council. We'll start with Councilor Morcillo, and then we'll go to Councilor Stott.
Thank you, Chair. Seeing the staff in the back of the room, Dave Greenbaum, please approach the microphone.
Thought I was going to avoid this. But
yeah, no, not a chance. Being the director of health and all of that, can you hum a few bars on your feeling, your research into the air quality concerns, the noise concerns?
Yeah, they're loud. I mean, do they spew off exhaust? Yeah, they're going to spew off exhaust. Do I have an opinion on this? Not particularly, to tell you the truth. I mean, I'm kind of agnostic about it. I agree. Listen, I'm a homeowner. I have an electric leaf blower. I rake my yard. I use a lawnmower. I have a gas lawnmower. I'll be perfectly honest with you. It's a gas lawnmower, but I think that I could go either way on this one. I think the enforcement's going to be difficult, to be honest, because we're going to get complaints. I think part of the other thing you have to keep in mind, I think the reason for the certain month ban is because who's using a gas leaf blower in the winter months? Very few people. I mean, I have neighbors that have them. They're not using them to blow snow away in most instances, unless it's light and fluffy, and it happens occasionally, but not very often. So I get the May to September thing, because that's when they're most frequently used. As far as DPW goes, I think that if they need to use them for certain instances, then that should be an exemption. But I'm a little surprised at the decibel levels that were thrown out. I think they'd be louder than that, quite frankly.
Agreed. Actually, I agree with that. Yeah. Okay. So no industry standard from the national boards of health?
I didn't come with that kind of information. I wasn't consulted on the ordinance, so I didn't have that kind of information prepared for it. So.
Okay. All right. My only comment is using a leaf blower on snow is a real guy hack that I'm sure
it may be. I don't
I'm making notes of right now.
I use my gas-powered snow blower, to tell you the truth.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate.
Sure. I'll stand here in case anybody else has anything for me.
Okay.
Councilor Stott.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. We were thinking on similar. I also was going to perhaps ask Fula up because the second part of the conversation is the communication and the enforcement. So it is interesting that the Board of Health hasn't discussed this yet. I would like to make a friendly request that it's brought in front of them to just get their thoughts or feedbacks. The big points that are continually brought up are noise and air pollution. Air pollution in two senses of both the gas emissions, but then what is also kind of picked up. And in my brain, not knowing what an electric blower does, it's still going to be loud and it's still going to be blowing things around. So I'm kind of stuck on that point, but I would love to hear the Board of Health conversation around those items as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would be happy to bring this to the board and have them, render an opinion. That's why I kind of don't want to make a determination here because I work for them. It's really something that should come from them. If we had been consulted earlier in the process, then maybe we could have had that conversation and had this, had this information for the council tonight.
Thank you. So the other kind of point that I wanted to reiterate again, I said earlier, was about a communication plan. Essentially, who would own this ordinance, right? So it's owning of enforcement. That's actually put in here of the ordinance and written of, I think it's the health agent and building inspector are the enforcement and the police. But I'm curious, and I don't think it's necessarily something that is in the ordinance, but would your department or the enforcement department be coming up with the communication plan to reach out to those companies to figure out, the tiered communication that goes out to them, the benefits of that, coming up with that plan? And I don't necessarily think that's your role, but I'm asking who that will be around those, just the process for getting wherever we end up being to getting that information out and making sure that it's fair and equitable, because this is going to be an economic hardship that is going to be passed on to residents. And honestly, I'm stuck on the residents of the large apartment buildings that cost is 100% going to be, if their landscape cost goes up, their rent is going to go up. So that's really where I'm stuck right now on the economic piece of it. So making sure that communication is well thought out, planned, works along, perhaps with other communities and how they handled it. It is, very interesting note that Councillor Cohen made at the beginning of this meeting, that it is mostly affluent communities and towns that have this band, which makes it's a little different than the makeup in Salem here. So that's, I guess I'm not necessarily throwing that out to you, because I don't know if you would own the communication plan around that, but I would throw that out.
I'm going to speak for myself, and I'm going to take it upon myself to speak for police and building too, but I don't think we want that responsibility. I mean, we're being given the responsibility of enforcing this ordinance with limited resources that are spread thin already. So to have that also thrown on our plate is going to be a lot more work that we just can't honestly take on. So I don't want that responsibility.
And I agree. I agree with Dave. We'll enforce as much as we can, but we need more people, and who is going to roll it out? It's never been brought to us, so it's not a thought process we've had. So it'll be very difficult. There's a lot going on in Salem, so to add this to enforce is going to be difficult.
Okay, so just something throwing out for my colleagues.
I'd like to throw an idea out to my colleagues. I mean, or to the other councilors. I'm really glad that you brought up a discussion with the Board of Health. I think we rely on them on a lot of things. They were, for example, just recently very instrumental in how we rolled out, our response to COVID. Whether it was at the restaurant level or whatever. So, making a friendly request that, because our next council meeting isn't until September, even if we move this forward, if it would be great to get a weigh-in from the Board of Health. Appreciate that.
Just realistically, my board isn't meeting in August, and we have a full agenda in September already, so it probably wouldn't be discussed until October.
That's all right.
So
I think no matter what happens, I think it would be really good to get some feedback, right? I just want to go back to this thing, just me personally. and I'm going to respectfully disagree with Councilor Merkel on something. And Danielle, who's a friend of mine, I've never put anything in front of the council except the wage theft ordinance that is perfect, okay? Like, I always feel like, how do we get to the next place as quick as, how do we get to where we need to be as quick as possible? I'm not sure, my biggest problem with this ordinance is that it just seems like if the technology changes the way we anticipate, like it has with things like heat pumps and solar, or things that have very similar technologies, very dependent on electronics, why can't we get to a place where we're not just passing an ordinance that addresses this issue for 3 months of the year? That's what I'm thinking. I mean, I'm not even thinking about like the difference between residential, commercial, exempting the city, all that stuff, how we enforce things. I'm just thinking like if we pass this ordinance in its current form, is there going to be an appetite to then change it and move to this bigger thing? Because a lot of times we do something and it seems to be working, hopefully, and then everyone gets used to it. So I'm just throwing this out to the council. I'm not saying we need to talk about this, but this is my thing, is if we're not actually having compliance with commercial until 2027, when are we going to be able to ban the gas leaf blowers? That's my thing. If the technology improves in the next 2 years, and it's really based on batteries, that's really what it is. It's batteries, and the technology for batteries is accelerating faster than on a lot of stuff. I mean, I'm not speaking as an expert on technology, but that just seems the way it's going. But I'm just going to throw this back at the council for whatever people want to say or do. Councilor Merkel.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. Just a couple of final thoughts. I appreciated the public comment, too. I appreciated, not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. I appreciated that. Also, yeah, it's really just to move the needle, because the goal is to do better and phase them out. But if most of these communities landed on a summer ban, because to have the spring and fall cleanups that are large would really elevate the financial hardship. And this is about balance and trying to get there incrementally as technology advances and allows us to move forward. So that's why that's why for a lot of this, it's a step to take. Also, I'll reference to, and yeah, I think it would be a great idea to have the Board of Health report back to the council their opinions and recommendations on this. But in Neil Duffy, our director for sustainability, had said in his statement that he sent to the council because he couldn't be here, that his department is standing by to create informational and educational materials to aid in this transition. And yes, of course, we need more conversation on the enforcement. We had landed on this in the conversation we had with the police chief, if he has any more comments on it, that it would be the police too, but also to be able to include the building and health departments, but obviously that needs more conversation with all the departments that would be affected with this. Absolutely. I agree with everything that has been expressed. Thank you.
Councilor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would say I would absolutely be in support of expanding the time frame of this being in effect, especially, and yeah, much appreciation to all of the public comment, but that was, some reasons for that were brought up. And as long as I'm on the council, I'd be excited to come back to this and strengthen it. I think that, I agree strongly with what Councilor Merkel said, is that we need a kind of starting point with this, and my hope with all of this, and maybe this is too optimistic, but just that the more and more municipalities across the state and across the country that pass things like this, even if they, are kind of starting points, which is happening, the more pressure that'll put on the industry and the technology to evolve. So that's my hope.
Question to you, Councilor Davis. How many of these communities are environmental justice communities?
I don't know.
One. I just have another question for the council, committee or not, is this ready? Like, it seems like there was a lot of stuff that came up about whether we mirror the compliance, how we do enforcement. I mean, right now, we're depending on 3 departments to do enforcement, but there's no actual direction of who starts the enforcement. Like, if a neighbor calls someone, who do they call first? No, I'm asking Councilors Davis and Merkel. Who do they call first? How do they respond? Since part of the enforcement is incumbent on the property owner and not the contractor, how do we enforce that?
Yes, I would defer to Chief Miller to answer that.
I'll tell you, I think they're going to call the health department first. Do you want to weigh in, Chief?
I mean, my feeling is that, as with all city ordinances, the buck stops with the police department. We have the ability to enforce almost all of them, except the ones that really exclude us. But I don't want to exclude my partners in city government. So I think that was why, in our conversations about the bill, I encouraged you to leave it open in terms of who had the ability to enforce the ordinance.
Councilor Starr.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. I think ward councilors will also get a lot of calls about enforcement. But I agree with the 3 departments on there. I think we did this with tour guides too, and parking tickets, to not just have it be one department. So it could be kind of spread the wealth with who can enforce. So I think that's actually a good idea there. What I'm taking away from this meeting is that there's some trepidation around the exemptions, especially for our own DPW. And perhaps a next step here would be to ask Solicitor Renard to draft some language around making those exemptions. I know she did send some language that I briefly glanced at in my email, but making those exemptions as, instead of just a broad stroke for the city being exempt, perhaps calling out specific reasonings for why the city would be exempt. Those 2 are kind of separate right now. I personally would like to see some language that combines them, so the city could be exempt for like public event cleanups, public emergencies, fires in the woods, whatever that conversation comes around to. But specifically calling out those reasons, I personally am not comfortable with allowing the city to be exempt for use that we are saying a commercial business is not exempt for. So commercial businesses are not coming in and cleaning up after public events. They're not helping us with brush fires in the woods, but they are doing the same exact work that the city is doing in a park, but on a public property. So personally, that would be, I think, a next step of perhaps looking at some language that would tighten that up, so we would all feel more comfortable understanding the advocacy that Ray is doing for the DPW and just, the concern there. But if the DPW has a concern with the equipment and the machinery that they have for the big jobs, 100% the commercial businesses do as well, and we should be having a level playing field there, for equity purposes. I don't think that that's fair to say do as I say, not as I do. We did that with the green building ordinance, started first with the municipal buildings and moved on. So I would make a motion for it to stay in committee and request City Solicitor Renard to draft some red line language around exemption uses. And then I would also add to that request for a more detailed communication plan. So obviously enforcement is one piece, sending out informational flyers is one piece, but an actual, and Councillor Watson felt, is always great about describing what is actually needed for a communication plan to the public, but how that would be detailed, who would be contacted, the timeframes for things to be contacted, who would own that level of detail I think we never see. We always just assume it would happen, and oftentimes it doesn't happen, and that it would be a valid concern. You know, if we're giving ourselves and the public a large runway to come in compliance with this, we need to set everyone up for success and not pass it, say, oh, look, we did it, and then 2 years from now, everybody's like, what, I can't use my gas blowers. So with that really long motion.
Can I ask you to clarify one thing?
Yes.
On the enforcement part that we're going to ask the solicitor to deal with, you're saying to have like several categories, like if it's public safety emergencies or whatever, fire, whatever.
Exemptions, you mean?
Exemptions, I'm sorry. But if it's something where we're exempting the city from something, we're not exempting commercial, so that those lines could be crossed. We want to make sure that we don't cross.
Yeah, so I think really the motion only needs to be that the matter stays in committee, and we'll request City Solicitor Renard to draft up red line languages, but that is the kind of the intent that I was going for, and I think we all, as members of the council, can send messages to City Solicitor Renard as to their feelings of what they want to have drafted in there, and then we can meet again to digest and finite. But yes, exemptions specifically to those items that only DPW would be taken care of.
Councillor Stott moves to keep in committee. Is there second by Councillor Jerslow? Any discussion? Councillor Morsillo?
I just have one thing to add to that, and that is I would love to see the sustainability department start already. The whole idea that if this is to happen and we come up with some date for, you know, when this ban starts, there's no reason why the city can't start now to start educating the public about why you would switch over from a gas to an electric. Anything, by the way, not just the leaf blowers, but all of them, and include rebates that companies are offering. Like, there's a lot that can happen right now to educate the public. I know he's got a newsletter, but that seems like a good sustainability issue to take up right now in the summer anyways, so I want to pass that on also.
So I'm going to agree with that, because I think our Sustainability and Resiliency Department, through Stacy Kilb and other people, have done a really good job at educating people on EVs and things like that, where they've actually, I know Councilor Merkel has been part of this, where they've actually had people being able to go out and try the stuff, and the attendance is usually pretty good, and no matter what we do, when we do it, how, you know, expansive this ordinance is or isn't, we should probably start that in advance. So any more discussion on keeping it in? Councilor Stott?
Can I just make a housekeeping request that Councilor Merkel mentioned that she had other resources that she used in her research, if those could be added to the shared drive, as well as Director Duffy's letter and Renard's edits and any other drafts that we have.
Any other discussion? Okay, on Councilor Stott's motion to keep it in committee, seconded by Councilor Jerslow, all in favor? Wow, I see 3 hands plus my own. I'm not really good at that part, which means it passes. And I do want to also thank all the department heads for showing up and contributing, and the ones who weren't able to make it but contributed through email and Zoom, and especially all the people from the public. I think we all learned a lot from everyone here. I'll take one more motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn, all in favor?